Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and today I'm going to walk you through block number 7 of the Sunshine and Shadows block of the month with Sit and Sew fabrics. So block 7 is right here on our quilt, and you can see we're going to be making a bunch of half square triangles and then piecing them together with squares to come up with a patchworky star block. So let's get started. So I've got all my squares cut, and the first thing we're going to do is use white squares and yellow squares to make half square triangles, and then we'll do the same with our gray. I'm going to start out by drawing a diagonal line on the wrong side of both of my white squares, and I've got a fabric marking pen to use for that so I can see my line for stitching. And if you are using a white on white fabric like I am, make sure that you have the fabric with the wrong side facing up. Sometimes it can be tricky to tell. So I'm going to pair each marked white square with a yellow square. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of that marked line, and that will give me 2 half square triangles. So I've stitched on both sides of that marked line for my squares, and now I'm going to cut on that original marked line, and that will give me 2 white and yellow half square triangles. So I'm going to head over to the iron and press. I'm going to press away from my light fabric, so I'm going to press toward the yellow. Do that with both, and then we'll square these up. I like to start out with a slightly oversized square because that way I can square them up and make sure that my half square triangle is as perfect as I can get it, which will make my piecing easier when I go to join the blocks together. So I'm going to trim this to 3.5 inches square. And each time I go to trim, I make sure that the diagonal line on my ruler is lined up with my seam line. And then I make sure I'm at 3.5. So there's one. And the second one, the same thing. You might be cutting just the tiniest little bit off. It might be a little more, but as long as you get it squared to exactly 3.5, it'll make your piecing easier when we join the units to make the block. So here's my first 2 finished half square triangles. I'm going to cut the second one apart and press and trim those as well. And then I'm going to use white and a darker gray and white and a lighter gray to make 2 half square triangles from each of these combinations. So I've got 8 half square triangles made, 4 yellow, 2 light gray, and 2 dark gray. Now all we need to do is lay out the half square triangles with the squares into our block, and then sew those units and squares together, and our block will be done. So let's take a look at how these pieces go together. We've got a white square in the upper left corner, and then a yellow half square triangle, which will be a star point. A dark gray half square triangle for another star point, and then a white square in the corner. And then we've got a light gray star point that goes next to a light gray square, and a dark gray square that goes next to a yellow star point. And then, start over here, a yellow star point, a dark gray square, a light gray square, and a light gray star point. Then for our bottom row, we're back to white in the corners, dark gray star point, yellow star point, and white square in the corner. So I've got my pieces laid out for the block, and you'll notice we have the four patch in the center made with 2 dark gray and 2 light gray squares. So what we're going to do is join those together first to make our block center. So if you look on the pattern, you can see there are pressing directions, and that will help us for nesting our seams, both for the centerpiece and for when we put the whole block together. So I'm going to start out by flipping these both over. I'm just going to sew both with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and come back and press them. So I've joined my squares into 2 patches, and I'm going to press these towards the darker fabric, which, like I said, will allow the seams to nest when we make them into a 4 patch. So when I flip the one over on the other, you can see my seams will go in opposite directions, which will allow everything to lay flat. And I'm going to put a pin in right behind where those seams match up. And that way I can leave the pin in almost until I start stitching over that seam line, and that will help me to have a more perfectly matched center. So I've got my pins in. I'm going to stitch the 1/4 inch seam allowance, come back and press it. And then we'll work on adding the star points around the edges. Here's my 4 patch. And if you look, you can see how nicely those 4 corners come together. So I am going to press it toward the dark fabric. Okay. Then we'll set it back into the center of our layout in the right spot. So the next thing to do is to join the star points on the sides to each other, and then we can add them to our block center. So same thing, I'm going to fold one over the other, and I'm going to look at this corner and make sure my seams line up. And put a pin in, and then a second one up at the top. Now these seams will not nest as nicely as the others, and that's because we pressed away from our light colored fabric. Put in 2 pins in this one as well, and then go stitch both of these. So to press these, I'm going to press them opposite the way the seam is going in the middle. So in my case, that's going to be pressing them both up towards the top of my block, which that is opposite what the seam is on my center 4 patch. So now I just double check my layout, and I can see I've got everything in the right spot compared to the pattern. I've got yellow on the top here, gray on the top there. My 4 patches lined up correctly, so I know I'm ready to sew these on because they're correct. So same thing, I'm going to flip this over, match up my seams, and they'll nest nicely because of how I pressed, and then put in the pins. And now when I go to sew my 1/4 inch seam, what I'm going to do is pay attention. I'm using this pin to show. Pay attention to where my half square triangle seam intersects with the seam here. And that's where I want my, ideally it will line up so your 1/4 inch seam goes right across there. And that's how you'll get nice points between your 4 patch and your star points. I'm going to do that on this side, and then do the same thing over here. And then it'll be time to add our outer border, our outer star points. So I've got the side star points on, and now we're going to press them toward the center, both because that will help with nesting the seams, and because it reduces bulk, because that way we're not folding over lots of seam allowances on themselves. So that will help your finished block to lay more flat. Okay, put this back in the center, And now it's time to sew the pieces in the top and the bottom rows together. So since I've got 4 pieces to sew, I'm going to sew them together in pairs for both the top and for the bottom. And then I will join the pairs to make one long row using the same piecing techniques I did for the star points on the sides. I've got my top and bottom rows pieced. Now I'm going to press them. And again, when you go to press them, refer back to the pressing arrows in the pattern, because it's not the same all the way across, and that is, again, is to both reduce bulk and make it easier to nest your seams as you join these top and bottom units to the rest of the block. Okay. So before I sew these on, just going to give it one last double check compared to the pattern that I've got all the pieces in the right places and all the star points oriented correctly so that I've got my star look. And I do. Save me some time with the seam ripper. Flip this top row over, and I'm going to pin together. I'm going to pin by each of the seams. And like I said, I like to pin just directly after the seam, because then I can leave the pin in as long as possible, which makes those joins a little more perfect, hopefully. And then same thing when I'm stitching where I've got the half square triangles. I'm going to try to make sure that my stitch crosses where the half square triangle seam line meets my vertical seam line. So I want my stitch to cross right there, and that will give me a nice sharp point. I'm going to pin the second end on as well in the same way. Then I'll join them both, and our month 7 block will be complete. Pretty quick when we're stitching with half square triangles and squares. So here's the pieced block. Now it's time for our final press. And for this, I'm going to press the rows that I just added out toward the edge of the block. And that will reduce the bulk, because we're pressing with our seams instead of basically folding them over. It looks like, thanks to my pinning, I've got some nice points and nice matches, so hopefully you do as well. And here is our final block. So let's take a look. We've got our 8 star points, our 4 patch in the middle, and the white background fabric. Looks great. So we finished block 7. Can't wait to see you back here next month when we will be piecing block 8, which I will tell you has a lot more pieces in it than this month's block does. All easy piecing, but we've got a little bit more to do in that block. So can't wait to see you for that, and invite your friends to join us for the Sunshine and Shadows block of the month. You've got all the videos online, and the patterns come once a month, so it's easy to catch up, and we can all sew together for the last couple months and get this quilt put together. Don't forget to visit sitansewfabrics.com to see the other kits that we offer, both pre-cut kits where all the pieces are cut for you, and kits made with fat quarter bundles or just yardage of fabric as well. And please follow us on Instagram. It is sitansewfabrics.com, or on Facebook. See you next month.